but this is Dr. Diviney. Obviously, if you've seen any of our webinars in the past, Dr. Diviney has been on those in the past. So some of you will know and recognise her. But for those that don't know you, do you just want to kind of say hello, kind of, you know, your position in the hospital at the moment, and just let people know who you are?
Yeah, so as Mark said, I've done a few of these webinars before. So if you've joined before, you will have kind of seen my face. I've been a doctor for nearly 5 years now. And I've been done my foundation training in the Northeast, which is kind of your first years out of medical school. Medical school was, I went to Manchester Medical School, and now I have been locuming and working on my teaching and working in A&E as well. So it's very apt and front line for the current pandemic to see how everything's changing.
And your kind of journey into medical school was one that a lot of students might relate to as well. Do you just want to kind of tell us a little bit about your journey into medical school?
Yeah, so I actually didn't get into medical school first time, and I know a lot of kind of students worry that that'll be the case for them, that, you know, if they don't get in, will they ever get in? But I kind of worked on what I had for my work experience, the actual quality of it, and actually worked on how to reflect. So that's very apt for a webinar today. But working on all those things, I got in second time round and got into Manchester, and now here I am.
Okay, cool. Right, I'll just go through a bit of kind of housekeeping stuff before we kind of pass back to you there. So yes, we will record this. We will send the recording out, and we also post it up on our YouTube channel as well. We'll send the slides out for everybody in a couple of days. What we'll do format-wise is we'll run through, or Dr. Diviney will run through a set of kind of slides and talk to you a little bit about reflection. And then we'll save all the questions for the end. Obviously, some of you have already used the Q&A function just to kind of test my camera there, which is great. But on the Q&A function, there's an upvote system. So if somebody else has asked the question that you wanted to ask, you can just kind of hit the thumbs up button and it will vote on that question, and it will raise the popular questions to the top so I can see them at the end. So please try and use that rather than posting the same question 1,000 times. It just means that I can see it and we can answer it a bit more efficiently. We'll have a couple of little polls as well, just to test that's working and to make sure that it's really engaging. And then, yeah, we'll pass over to Dr. Diviney, who will run through everything you need to know about reflection. Okay. So if we just move to the next slide, I'm just going to ask a couple of questions, and these are just to gauge who has kind of been watching the webinars before, who's new and who this is the first time for. And then the second one is just to work out how people are feeling about this kind of reflection. So I'll throw up the first one now. So that should be up on your screens now, and you can just click to vote. Give that another couple of seconds. It looks like everybody's just about managed to vote there. So I'll end that, and I'll share the results as well so you can see the general answers. So 54% are regulars or have watched them in the past, which is great. And then 46%, this is the first one. That's amazing as well. Obviously, those people who are watching it for the first time, if you want to watch any of our kind of webinars that we've done in the past, they're all on the past webinar section or on the YouTube channel. So you can go and catch up on those if you want. And the second question, let's find out how you're feeling about reflection at the moment. Right, okay, looks like most people have managed to vote there. So I'll end the poll and I'll share the results as well. It's all anonymous, so don't worry about that. So a lot of people, 64%, are not very confident about reflection, 12% not confident at all. We have 5 people that are very confident, so that's great. Thanks for tuning in anyway. And then 23% are confident. So that's good for us because it kind of gauges where we need to pitch this. So hopefully by the end of this webinar, we've kind of moved some people from that not very confident up towards that confident level at least. So I'll ask that question again at the end, and we'll see how we've done. Right. Okay. I think at this point it's over to you, Dr. Divney, if you want to kind of take it away.
Yeah, sure. So, just explain kind of what we're going to cover today. So reflection is really important, whether you kind of know what you're applying it to for your application or not. I'll kind of, we'll go on, why do we need to reflect? What can we use it for your university applications? How to actually do it. We'll give you 2 suggested ways of kind of working through reflective scenarios, a few examples, and then just kind of like a little diary that I think is quite useful. But we'll work through each of them together, and then we'll have lots of time for questions at the end. So why do we need to reflect? So reflection is really, really key. Obviously, you can see that a few of you are kind of reasonably confident on kind of reflecting, might know the importance of it. Reflection is really, really key for university applications because they don't kind of just want to see, you listing everything that you've done. They want to see kind of, yes, what you've done, but how you've actually learned from it. So there's lots of kind of questions that universities want to address with reflection, and a few of these questions are highlighted here. So we've got personal skills and attributes of yourselves, skills and attributes of a good healthcare professional. We normally have kind of people aspiring to be medics that do listen to our webinars, but this reflective skill is so useful for lots of professions: dentistry, veterinary, nursing, physiotherapy. So it is a really good skill to have for lots of healthcare professional roles. What you've learned, how it's changed you, and how this has made you a better future doctor. So there's lots of reasons to reflect, even more suggested reasons to reflect. If you've been on work experience, what have you seen? What have you learned about what you've seen? What have you learned about the NHS? What have you learned about this current pandemic crisis? There's lots of things that you can currently be reflecting on. Yes, we are in lockdown, but there is still lots of things that you can be reflecting on that could be potentially asked in interviews. Also difficult scenarios. You might kind of get an interview question that approaches a difficult conversation or a difficult scenario, not necessarily about medicine. It might be breaking bad news about that you've not been able to bake someone's cake. That's kind of an interview question that I've heard of. So, you can kind of, if you can reflect on the skills that are used in a difficult scenario, you'll be able to use them for the future yourself. So yeah, there is really a endless list of possibilities that you can be reflecting on. Every scenario that you ever see can be very, useful to reflect. So the key things that you are going to be reflecting is for your personal statement and for your interview. They are big key areas of reflection as part of the application process. So for your personal statement, when you're listing, yes, I've got good leadership skills because I did this. How do you know that you did that? How did you learn that you could do that skill? What did you learn from having this role? That's the bit that the universities want to see, not that you were captain of this, not that you got grade 8 in this of an instrument. They want to know how you've used that experience, learned from that experience, and can change and better yourself from that experience. Okay, so that's what brings your application to this next level, because it kind of shows that you really understand yourself, you understand the future career that you want to do, and it kind of shows that you have a more depth of perception.
Yeah, I think just on that point, one of the things when you're talking about the next level when it comes to personal statements and interviews, one of the things that we definitely see when we're looking at students' personal statements and when we're doing mock interviews for students, it is that difference between listing things that you've seen and listing things that you've done, and then learning how to reflect. A lot of universities, they just switch off if you just give them a list of things that you've done, or list, I've seen this surgery and this surgery. It doesn't matter how fancy the surgery is. It's the next step, and it's this reflection that is so important. And that's what we really need to master, really, isn't it?
Yeah, definitely. And we'll go through, we're going through why and what at the minute, but we will come to strategies and kind of suggested kind of frameworks, as we're calling them, later on in the webinar, because you'll be like, oh, well, how do I do that? We'll come to that section, so don't worry about that. Okay. So yeah, there's lots of reasons why we need to reflect, and personal statement and interview for you guys as students are our main, what are we reflecting for? So I've kind of done 2 different suggested frameworks. This is a very simple one that I kind of think of reflection in this way, and then there's a more detailed one that I'll put on next. So I kind of think about it in 3 separate stages. So the step 1 is this kind of listing, this description. I attended work experience in this hospital. That's your description. It's very simple. That's the stuff that just sets the background. And this is actually where usually students fall short. They kind of stay at step 1. But step 2 and step 3 is actually where it gets you the kind of leveling up and this kind of better application. So you've got your description in step 1. Step 2 is, reflecting internally. How have you felt in that situation? What were your emotions in that situation? What have you personally learned from that situation? So it's thinking about you yourself. What have you learned? How has it changed you? So that's what I mean by reflecting internally and reflecting for the future. I'll come to the next slide to kind of describe that a little bit more, but that's just thinking how to advance that further. So there really is no right and wrongs when you're reflecting, because it's how it feels to you, especially step 2, how it comes across to you, how you've learned, what questions you had to raise. But step 3 is where it really advances. How has it changed you? How have you, how can you actually take it forward? Have you learned to be a better empathizer? Are you going to use that for the future? How has it changed you as a person? Has it made you a better potential doctor? That's the really kind of tipping point that gets you there. Oh yeah, this person knows what they're talking about now. So it really is just a brief description on your step 1. Reflect internally, and then reflect for the future. So that's our very simple framework that you can use. You can use this for any situation. So say, for example, you have been working in a charity shop, and you were able to take charge and run like a charity event, like the Macmillan, like coffee mornings and things. So even if it's something as simple as that, that's your brief description. So you took charge, you were the leader, you organized this event for the charity shop. Then step 2 is your reflection. How did you feel that your leadership skills went? What was it about you that made that successful? What was it that might have went wrong? And then how did that change you, and how did that make it better? So, you learned that your leadership skills and your communication skills were really good. So actually, this applies to being a good doctor, because doctors are leaders, doctors are good communicators. So it kind of is that kind of little stepwise process. This is our other suggested framework. So it is more of a descriptive framework, and you can kind of fit this more into a table and actually break down scenarios further. So this is called Gibbs reflective cycle. So this is just a cyclical way of breaking down and reflecting on situations. So we've got our stepwise process again. So we've got our description, feelings, evaluation, analysis, conclusion, and action plan. So I'll move to the next slide so you know what each of those steps are a little bit more. So again, similar to step one or the other framework, a very simple description of the situation. You can see that it is the first step to set the background, but that's it. You don't have to describe what date, what time, what hospital, what person. You know, it's not the main part of reflection. It's just a sentence and that's it. And then you move on to the evaluations. You know, evaluating your own feelings, evaluating good things and bad things about the scenario, you know, making sense of it, and then actually bringing it all together. What have you learned and how can things be taken forward for the future? So it's very similar to the last framework, but it just breaks it down that little bit further. So, you know, there is really, you know, no right way to reflect. But it really is just making sure that you're reflecting about you yourself, reflecting about how this will make you a better doctor. That's the ultimate things that the universities want to be able to see. So we'll go through just kind of how to actually apply this really. So this is going to be our first examples. They are made up examples. They're not examples from me, but this is our example one. I have broken it down more into Gibbs framework. So this is thinking about work experience at a GP. So our step one, our very simple one sentence description. When I was on work experience at a GP practice, I observed the doctor empathize with the patient when discussing their depression. That's very simple. It doesn't describe how long you were on work experience. It doesn't describe what was the name of the GP practice. It's very simple. The next stage, I thought the doctor was very empathetic with the patient when discussing their depression. So that's your thoughts and feelings about the scenario. Step 3 and 4, they can be very similar, evaluation and analysis. So I have put them together here, but you can see the subtle difference. So I observed the patient's body language relax in response. So that's your evaluation of the good job. And they were much more comfortable in discussing their difficult situation. So you can see that that's a good evaluation of the scenario. Then you can actually, that analysis is this calming language. So that's kind of taking it that little bit further on reflection. Your step 5 and 6. So this is a skill that I understand is important. It can help someone who feels vulnerable to open up. So that's your step 5. And then your step 6, I plan to embrace and develop in the future this empathy to become a better doctor. So that's your action plan. It's very short. This is a very short paragraph. That's your skill that you've learned about empathizing. So this can be used, for example, in an interview question. So that's just our example 1. Example 2, taking it a little bit different away from specifically hospital and GP experiences. So this is thinking about a particular skill. So again, this could be used for a personal statement question, part of personal statement, or it could be used as an interview question if it's, for example, can you demonstrate a time that you showed good leadership? So as captain of the rugby team, I developed leadership and teamwork skills. Again, step 1, very simple, not very much description, just setting the background. Step 2, I felt I was a good leader. Your feelings, your exploration. Okay. Step 3, my ability to incorporate others' opinions and ensure I thought of others in the team. That's your further evaluation. And step 4 is your analysis. What was it about your leadership that made it so good? You know, you received feedback from the team, you remained good friends. I think this style of leadership helped. So that's your further analysis. Step 5 and 6. So that furthers it, that concludes and thinks about that action plan. I think this is what would make me a good doctor. That's your conclusion. Very simple, very straightforward. They work in members of a team throughout a hospital. A good leader should be considerate of others. This is a plan this is a skill I plan to hone and use in my future career. Again, it's just a very short paragraph. You know, I'm sure you guys, there's not very many characters for a personal statement, so you really have to make sure things are concise. So there are examples, and these are just some of the key points as well. You know, yes, you've got your own viewpoint, but actually, especially for kind of interview questions, really think about other possible viewpoints. So if, for example, you're asked to think about a difficult situation or think about an ethical question, you really have to think about reflection from other people's point of view as well. So it really is, it is such a good skill to have, because yes, you can personally reflect, but if you can reflect from someone else's point of view as well, that really shows. The university kind of interviewers will be like, okay, yeah, they know what they're talking about. Another really key point is that actually as doctors, we reflect in what's called a portfolio. So it's like an online portfolio. It's cases that we've seen, things that we've learned, maybe mistakes we've made. And we actually reflect on an online portfolio, and it gets evaluated and it gets judged. Whether we're reflecting properly and reflecting appropriately on whether we move up the next levels of kind of being a doctor. I had a portfolio at Manchester Medical School. Sometimes universities have a portfolio as well, and you had to pass a portfolio section on reflection on to advance onto the next year of medical school as well. So it's been adapted by medical schools as well to kind of really develop this skill even further. And yeah, my last thing is really think about typical questions or kind of typical scenarios that might come up in interviews, or even ones that you want to kind of bring into personal statements, and have an example for each. So if, for example, you're talking about an interview question about why do you want to be a doctor, you'll be able to bring reflection through to that, because if it's something that you've seen from work experience that you're using as an example of why you want to be a doctor, you can then say, right, describe my situation, how I thought about the situation, evaluated it, and then that action plan and conclusion right at the end, that's ultimately your, well, actually, this is the reason why I want to be a doctor, and this is why I'm sitting here applying to medical school. So it really is a good skill to have. But yeah, there's lots of other situations and kind of like events and interview questions that have kind of examples prepared for. So all your kind of buzzwords that they look for in university: communication, leadership, teamwork, caring, empathy, all those words have scenarios, reflective scenarios ready, because then you're just prepared, you know what you're talking about, you know what they're looking for, and if you can reflect properly on those skills and why you have them, how you gain them, then that's that tick box that those universities are looking for, and that's that higher level that universities are looking for. Okay, so that's our kind of frameworks that we've talked about. We've talked about our examples, why it's important. So, you know, you really, really do use this skill. And last thing I'll highlight to you guys is to really keep a work experience diary. This is just an example of one that I used to use. and it just breaks things down. You can see date and location. That might just be for you to remember what kind of aspect of work experience it was. That specific example, it can just be, right, I seen a GP discuss this. Your feelings, your evaluation, skills and attributes you learn, what have you learned, and anything that questions that you had, because you might want to go later back and kind of say, oh, actually, I never got this question answered, and you've got more work experience coming up, and then you can ask that question then. So it's really good to have a diary, because if you had work experience in year 11 and you're coming to do your application, you are going to forget if you haven't kept a diary. So again, this is just an example, but if you keep a continuous diary, then it's easier to reflect. Okay, I think I've talked enough. We'll come on to questions, because I know you guys prefer how to kind of ask questions and things, but we just have our last little poll here. If Mark doesn't mind putting that up, just kind of how you feel about it now.
Yeah, what I was going to say, I might just leave that poll until after the questions, because I have some questions for you as well, actually.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So just going back to look at that initial table, that work experience diary.
Yeah.
Like we quite often give this to students that come and join our kind of like London course and various other courses. But what we quite often see is a lot of people using the specific example and using loads and loads of words in their personal statement, but only getting to specific example. So is that something that you've seen in kind of personal statements quite a lot as well? People only getting to stage 1, which is that specific example column, but then almost not having the rest of the columns filled out and not having that communicated in their personal statement?
Yeah, it is actually a really common thing. So if I go back to our Gibbs stage, so when we're talking about that specific example, that is only our step 1. And you're right, actually, that is the most common stage when reading personal statements, that students kind of go fully into describing the situation, fully into what they did. And then if they do reflect, it's maybe like half a sentence, and this is why, and this. But actually, it needs to be switched. There needs to be less actual description and more reflection and evaluation on the scenario. So yeah, so when we're going back to that diary, that's why there's so little of that columns and so little of that table that's down to the specifics of the description of what you've done. The rest is all reflection and evaluation, because that's the stuff that the universities want to see.
Yeah, that's the difference that we see between kind of average applicants and the really, really good applicants, is they're not just reeling off a list of things they've done. They're using 2 or 3 really specific things they've done, and then kind of diving deeper into that, and getting into the heart of that and reflecting really well on what they've done.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think that table's a really good example, or a really good table for people to go away and use, whether you just make that in Excel or in a Word document or even on your phone. It doesn't matter, as long as you've got that kind of structure. I think once you start using it, you'll get into the kind of the routine of starting to think, well, how did that make me feel? Why did that make me feel like that? How can I evaluate that a bit more? And once you do a few of them, I think your mind will start to get into that rhythm, and it'll make
absolutely
it so much easier.
Yeah, like it is a skill. It's a proper kind of honed skill that you need to practice. I'm reasonably okay at reflection now, and I won't say I'm any sort of expert on doing it, because it takes years to kind of fully get practice. But the earlier you start, the earlier you kind of get this skill drilled into you and say, right, this is the description, this is how I feel, this is my analysis, this is a conclusion, this is my action plan. It really is, the earlier you do it, just get into it. That's how you reflect. And, that's really is key to personal statements and interviews.
Yeah, I quite like the way you kind of broke it down between the theory, which is that kind of the Gibbs reflection cycle, and then an actual practical tool that will go away and help you actually do that. Because sometimes with theories, it can be a little bit difficult to bring that into real life, and I think the table does that really well. I really like that.
Yeah.
So I'm just looking at the Q&A now. So if we want to kind of open it up to questions, the first question on there actually is about work experience and virtual work experience, things like that. But I just wanted to kind of make a point on that as well. Whilst we've been talking about work experience through this webinar, obviously we appreciate that not all students can get hospital work experience at the moment because of the COVID situation. We appreciate that completely. And when we say work experience, we're not necessarily meaning, in a GP practice or in a medical setting. And anybody that didn't see the last webinar we did a whole thing about work experience during COVID-19 and insights that you can get during COVID-19. But the first question does relate to virtual work experience, which again, I'll probably just half answer that and I'll open it up to you as well. Medical schools have already put statements out, saying that they are accepting a much broader range of experience now, and they will be much more understanding of these kind of virtual work experiences, these webinar learning sessions. So yes, if you can find virtual work experience, then fantastic. Just make sure you reflect on it really well. Is that something that you've kind of found and you would agree with?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. At the end of the day, everyone really is in the same boat. It is a global pandemic. It's not just kind of assigned to the UK. It's not just assigned to a particular location that kind of like lockdown has. Everyone is in similar positions. So, universities, they are more accepting, they are more open-minded, and they do understand, because at the end of the day, there are a lot of restrictions that I'm sure everyone has come across. So you just got to remember that you're not alone, and there are other students are feeling the same.
Yeah, one thing that we are doing as well, obviously we're not going to be able to run our in-person summer courses this year. And one of the things that we're doing is we're actually building out a virtual GP kind of film set at the moment. So we can actually deliver work experience for our summer students. So it's a strange time, but these things, again, it's about what you take from it. You can get all kinds of insight and work experience from all kinds of places, virtual work experience being one of them, but just make sure that you reflect on it really well. Make sure you use those tables and those tools, because that's the difference between kind of, the really, really good applications and really good personal statements.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. The next question is about wider reading books. And I have a little bit of an answer for this as well, actually.
Yeah, go for it.
So I keep referring back to this webinar a couple of weeks ago.
Well, it was a good webinar.
The same thing again. But again, we had a reading list in there. I might just see if I can share my screen. Is that possible?
Yeah.
It might turn your screen off, but
yep.
Let me just try this. Can you see that? Can you see that slide?
Yeah.
Cool. So these are actually the slides that are part of the last webinar we did. So if any students want to, take a screenshot of that. And then another set there as well. Again, you can find those slides on the website. If you go to the webinar section or the past webinar section all those slides from that work experience webinar are all there as well. So you can go and find that list of books if you want. Okay, cool. Hopefully we've done that one. Fine. The next question down again is about UCAT. We will do a separate webinar. The UCAT as a whole thing is something that needs its own webinar.
It's a whole hour.
Yeah, if not more. So we'll do another completely separate webinar based on that. Right, let's have a look. So this is quite a good question from Daisy. I'll take part of the question because there's a few in there. Mm-hmm. How can you reflect on books, and do they look for certain values?
Yeah, so books, as Mark's just kind of showed you on slides, is obviously one of the ways that we can, you can be getting insight of the kind of hospital and medical world. I think I definitely put a book down into my personal statement, actually. And, you can definitely apply it to the framework that we've kind of approached in this webinar, because you can just say, right, I've read this book, that's your just step one, and then if you've kind of learned something specifically about a book that you've read, and it's kind of made you think, maybe I need to be going down this direction, or maybe I need to be doing this sort of work experience, or maybe it highlighted to you that you needed to be doing more kind of community service and things like that. I definitely think it's if you've learned something, worthwhile, and it's changed how you feel, it's changed, what you've thought, I think it's definitely worthwhile kind of thinking about that as a reflective kind of scenario and reflective kind of event, definitely. Yeah,
I think that's a really good question as well.
Yeah.
Especially given how many people are talking about wider reading and books, and people have got a bit more time to spend reading at the moment. So yeah, there's definitely things to be learnt and reflected on in there, definitely. Mm-hmm. Great question. So the next question is about work experience, and when do you think work experience placements will be opened in hospitals? Do you have any kind of insight into that, being in A&E at the moment?
So I think things are starting to open up a little bit more. We still have, so we don't have volunteers in kind of in A&E itself and in wards itself at the minute, but we still have volunteers at the kind of front reception area where there's no kind of patients and things, or kind of clinical procedures and things. So actually things are starting to open up a little bit more. I've seen a few kind of statements from hospital kind of on their websites that they're reviewing things in the near future. So some have said kind of they're going to review work experience mid-July, some have said end July, some have said end of August, which obviously is a fair few weeks away. But each kind of hospital website, if you, for example, Google a particular hospital and then type in work experience at the end of it, there's quite a lot of hospital websites that have a particular page that says, right, this is what we're doing, still submit applications and we'll review them, or we're not accepting applications. But things are starting to go in the right direction for hospital and GP work experience.
That's really positive to hear as well, because a lot of students obviously want to gain that experience, and it's just been completely cut off. So hopefully things will start to open back up, and students can start to get some of those more traditional work experience places back. This is quite a nice question as well. How can you reflect on webinars and talks from doctors effectively? Quite a good one, given we're doing a lot of webinars at the moment.
Yeah, and quite apt for obviously during lockdown as well, because obviously, as you said, traditional work experience has been limited or totally kind of stopped altogether. So you really do have to think about reflecting on other things and using other forms of insight into the medical world. And yeah, absolutely, webinars is a really good one, because really education and healthcare is becoming more online nowadays. Like even clinics for specialties in hospitals even have virtual clinics that they basically kind of review your case or your x-rays and things online, and either give you a ring and have a conversation at home, or actually have like a video chat. I know in our region here, there's like a musculoskeletal service that's doing it. There's so many podcasts and kind of I watch the Royal Society of Medicine webinars. But yeah, absolutely, you can reflect on all of these. They're educational. You can learn so much from them. So again, if you use the framework that we've kind of approached in this webinar, you can absolutely use it. If you've learned things about healthcare systems and the NHS, certain conditions, anything interesting, and how it's changed kind of any skills and attributes and things that you've learned about, absolutely, like if you use that framework, you can't really go wrong.
Okay, awesome, thank you. I'm just going to look slightly further down because we've got 456 open questions.
Lovely.
So I want to try and make sure that we get through a bit of a mix.
Mm-hmm.
Just give me 1 second.
Yeah.
It's quite a lot about personal statements, obviously, because reflection is used so much within the personal statement. Mm-hmm. Again, we'll probably do a full webinar on personal statements, but there are a couple of ones that kind of link back to reflection.
Yeah. I suppose the key thing about kind of personal statements and reflection is, if I'll try and kind of briefly summarize what's useful, but if you're kind of drafting your personal statement, what I'd kind of do is make a list of the things you want to include, and then actually, say for example, if you've got your DAV award and that's something that you want to include in your personal statement, reflect on that and what you've kind of that evaluation and that analysis and that conclusion. Do that for that scenario and see if it actually is worthwhile putting in. Do that for all the things that you want to include, because then you can actually see, actually, I didn't learn a great deal from doing that, so why am I going to include it? But if you have something, even because people talk all the time about kind of traditional work experience, and say for example, people might be working like I mentioned it before, like in a charity shop, or in like a rescue home for like animals and things. If you've learned more about that, then that's the stuff that you should be including in your personal statement. So you kind of break down your personal statement into you've done your bullet points, you've done your reflection, and then you've kind of that's your personal statement. So it's quite, once you've done the reflection and taken out all the dates and times and names and things, you can really condense it and put it into little sections of reflection.
Okay, awesome. I'm just trying to look for some more answers that are kind of further down as well to give everybody a good chance. So here's a question from Humaira. How do you keep sentences in the personal statement short but make it sound good? I think, again, that goes back to using that table, because that does the hard lifting and the hard work for you in that way.
Yeah, absolutely. Because like we were saying, the biggest kind of caveat that students do is this taking and spending 3 sentences on describing. So if you took away that section and just really condensed it on my work experience or when I was at a GP practice, that's it. Like, that's your condensed section for your step 1. Then you can go on to the evaluation stage. If you really look at say, for example, you've got a scenario where you've written a paragraph and you're like, oh, that is way too wordy. Read it like you're reading it from a university kind of application point of view. You know, if you reread it and think, oh, I don't need that actually, like, why do they need to know that? Or actually, that doesn't make sense, just take it out. And then get someone else to read it, and then someone else to read it and be like, oh, does that make sense? Do you think I should include that? And then that can condense it even further. So yeah, write it as, you know, big as you want, but then really condense it and take out all the bits that you, reading it from someone else's point of view, then you can say, actually, no one needs to know that.
So here's a question as well. Again, it's about work experience, but it links through to reflection again. Mm-hmm. How can being a lifeguard be considered as work experience in medicine?
Yeah, really good question. Probably quite a few skills of being a lifeguard can be applicable to doing medicine. Absolutely. If you think of the role of a lifeguard, they are ultimately there to protect. They're ultimately there to safeguard. They're ultimately looking out for everyone there. And their job is to, you know, help people if they're in trouble. So if you think about the skills that they might need, if you've been as a lifeguard in a certain scenario where someone came into difficulty, that is very easily transferable to someone being in difficulty in hospital. Because if you think about the skills that you need when someone's in difficulty, you need really good communication skills, you need an element of authority, you need to be empathetic to the scenario. You know, there's so many skills that are transferable. So if you think about all this, you know, scenarios and important significant events of you being a lifeguard, then you can absolutely break it down, reflect on it, and then that action plan conclusion, that's where you can then bring it round and say, this is why I would be a better doctor, because I've done this.
Okay, excellent, thank you. We have another question from Hamira. I think it's another Hamira from the one from before. If you only write about 1 or 2 work experience situations in depth with great reflection, is that better than mentioning all the work experience you've ever done? I don't want to seem like I've done too little work experience.
Yeah, so that is a really good question, because I think that's always a common worry that, oh, have I done enough? Actually, if you say, for example, if you take someone, and actually I'm talking from experience, because I 100% did this my first time round in applying. So I've wanted to do medicine since I was like yay high. I was one of those childs apparently that had like the little toy doctor set. And my first time applying, I had loads of work experience. I had lots of hospital shadowing, but I did the thing that I'm telling you not to do. I listed it all. It was all that step 1. It was all description and no analysis and no reflection. So I actually think that's what ultimately made me not get in first time. It's not a case of being able to list everything that you've done in the world. That's not the point, because there's going to be someone out there probably who's done more. That's okay. If you've only got kind of 1 or 2 things, yes, the key is to really reflect on it. But I suppose just need to be careful that you're not repeating yourself, if that makes sense. So if you do have less work experience and you are worried about that, just do make sure that you're reflecting on different scenarios and different skills. So you don't want to say, oh, I've been a good leader because I've been doing this, and I've been a good leader because I've been doing this. So that'd become obvious that you've less work experience. And I say work experience in the very general term. It's, you know, work experience can be having a certain role in schools. It can be, you know, doing a certain project. So work experience really is a broad term.
Yeah, there's quite a lot of questions that are very similar actually. So I'd like Maya's another one that's asking, you know, how many examples should I put in? There's really not a fixed amount, and it will vary with all different personal statements. But at least if you've got that diary filled out, and you've got the table filled out, then at least you've got a lot to pick from. It's always a lot easier to go from, you know, 10 examples down to 3, rather than having 2 examples and then, you know, not having anything else to talk about. So there's not a fixed number, but try and write as much in your table, so when you come to write your personal statement, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, exactly. So when I was saying kind of bullet point things, that, you know, bullet point it in your table, you know, make sure that you've got things to choose from, so that when you do come to reflect, then you can, that's your bulk out. It's not the experience. The bulking out section is your reflection. So, you know, again, there's no specific number, like Mark said, there's no specific quantity. There are sometimes, depending on universities, some look for particular types, or sometimes particular like aspects of work experience. So on UCAS you can see it kind of under universities. So say, for example, you clicked on Manchester, there's a work experience requirements section. So if you click on that, sometimes universities do have kind of particular things, like Manchester want you to have a caring role. So do look, if there's particular universities that you want to apply to, do look at that work experience requirements section as well.
There's a good question here from Kalsum. On your personal statement, would you write about the work experience that's been cancelled, or do you think this is just a waste of characters?
I think it'd be quite hard. I think it's hard to reflect on that, really, because how can you learn from something that's been cancelled? I think that's the big thing. So I you know, if it was me, I probably wouldn't.
Yeah, I think if I was the admissions person, I'd be like, why are you telling me about what's been cancelled? Why are you not telling me about what you did and what you proactively went out and found and did? You know, even if it's volunteering in your community or any of the other things that we spoke about in the Work Experience and Insight webinar last time, why haven't you done that? So I'd be very careful with that one.
It's a good question, though, because I think that'll be on a lot of people's minds, because I'm sure a lot of people had lots of different work experience set up and it's being cancelled. So it is a really good question to highlight, though, because there will be other people thinking the same thing.
Yeah, definitely. Obviously, we're nearly coming up to an hour. So what I'd like to do, we've been through quite a few questions. I'd like to redo that poll again, just to see if we've managed to move that needle just a little bit and help some people. So I'm going to launch that same one again, and just to see if we've been helpful, really, if it's helped anybody. Hopefully it has. Quite a few coming in, so we'll just give it another couple of seconds whilst everybody votes. Hopefully it's moved up towards kind of confident and very confident, because otherwise we've not been very good, have we?
Yeah, and to be honest, you know, I'd expect most people, like, kind of, you know, you can see nearly 75% of you guys have said you're now confident. I wouldn't expect you to say very confident. You know, this is something that you have to put into practice. And absolutely, you know, if any of you have done work experience or have had roles and projects and things like that you've done already, you know, you've got the table here. We're going to send you out the slides and you can kind of see that work experience diary template. So do get cracking on your reflections. This is something that you can do in lockdown and something that you can put into practice now, because then when you get more experience when it comes to writing personal statements, even for the guys and girls in October, then, you know, this is something you can definitely put into practice and get more confident over the next couple of weeks to months.
Yeah, definitely. And I do apologise that we haven't managed to get through the other 509 questions. We'll probably be here all night. So sorry if we didn't manage to kind of answer your questions in this one. Again, we will have lots and lots of webinars coming up in the future. We'll try and get something done on the UCAT soon. And then the personal statement, once we get slightly closer to that, we'll definitely do one on that as well. Yeah, just kind of check out our YouTube page. We upload all these videos there, and our Instagram page. If you're on Instagram at all, that's a good place, because we'll put announcements out about when we do the webinars. So yeah, thank you very much for tuning in. I'm really sorry that we can't get through all the questions, but hopefully you've got a table there that you can kind of take away and use and start to use, and everybody can use that. And we've got some frameworks in there for you, so you can go away and start using some of those. So yeah, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll do some more webinars soon. Okay, thank you.